Well, hello. I'm here with Caitlin to talk about a forbidden topic. We're going to avoid a certain word today to see if this actually prevents us from being canceled again and taken down by YouTube's brilliant algorithm. I believe I've overestimated the intelligence of the YouTube content filtering system, and it is, in fact, a simple word filter using Bayesian logic. So we have a forbidden word we will not speak today. At least that's
Mm.
my plan.
Yes, let's see if the audience can figure out what that secret word is.
That's right. That's right. But the theory is if you don't mention the forbidden word, you can discuss things without YouTube blocking your podcast. But
Okay.
anyway, the first one I've got, I thought was very charming. In the Ars Technica, Dan Gooden, of course, has got an article here about a side channel attack where they steal your cryptographic keys by video recording the power LED. And I hadn't thought of this, and I dare say the designers of computers hadn't thought of this, but the power LED is just lit up by something like the voltage of the power supply, and they didn't think about the fact that LEDs are high bandwidth flickering devices. So in fact, it is flickering at some ridiculous rate, megahertz or gigahertz, reflecting the instantaneous use of power, which is exactly what you need to break the cryptographic key. And so they found that just a standard webcam can be run. The newer webcams have this mode called the rolling shutter, where it actually tracks pixel by pixel. So it's very much faster than like just 60 frames a second. It's many more. And you can just zoom in to where the light from the LED fills the whole screen. And now you get a very high precision in time of the flickering. And that's, of course, enough to leak out the key. And you can do it from 60 feet away. So that's pretty charming. And it sounds quite effective. And of course, the obvious solution is they ought to put something like an LC filter on the LED so that it can't flicker very fast, but only like comes on in a tenth of a second or something like that. But nobody has apparently bothered to do that.
Yeah, or just, I mean, not even a filter, just a capacitor, so that if the power fluctuates, it just keeps a steady voltage.
Yeah, I remember back in the early days of computer, they would talk about watching the blinking lights. I remember I used the really early generation computers. They had these lights that would flicker every bit going by. And it was just sort of so you could tell whether the power was on or not, but nobody much thought about like leaking out the data there, but in principle you could. All right. And let's see, are we up to, yes, we're up to Caitlin, who has the all forbidden article.
So yeah, so this is the all forbidden article. We're not going to be using a certain word.
That's right.
So back in 2019, or we're going to call it 19 from here on out, there something happened, and there was a disease. We're going to call it disease 19.
Yeah.
Disease that shall not be named at 19, um, affected the world, and this disease, which we don't even know the name of. We've totally forgotten the name of it. It caused everyone to uh, go essentially work from home, and you have to wait for a vaccine, and we're basically stuck in our homes for like 2 years. And at the time when this happened, I was still working in the government as a contractor. And so I had, all the intel and stuff, and we knew that that this disease originated from China, and that it originated from a lab. Um, most likely. I mean, at the time, it wasn't like we didn't
Well,
100% know, but
well, I remember at the time, everyone said it absolutely came from the food sales at the wet market, and this lab leak theory was just an evil conspiracy theory.
uh, that was not the case inside the government. We knew 100%.
That was certainly not what you got from the established news media.
No, because the established news media was following good reporting principles when dealing with pandemics. One of the things that we know not to do during a pandemic is to blame a country for the pandemic. So, for
Well, they
example,
never
like,
vigorously blamed the country. They just blamed them for having like sloppy food sales, but not for creating it in a lab.
no, well, the idea was that we did not want to put blame on another country, because it would put Asian Americans at risk, right? We didn't want to call it the Wuhan flu.
Well, sure.
We didn't want to call it the Chinese virus. That would have been really inappropriate. And even during the pandemic, we did see a rise in Asian American hate crimes, and so
Oh, and even still,
there
yeah.
was an absolute um I'm not going to call it a conspiracy, but uh, an effort to minimize, blaming of China while we were in the pandemic. And we didn't want to say anything until we were like 100% sure. And even then, it would have to wait till after the pandemic.
Well,
And
I feel betrayed because I thought the lab leak theory was just a conspiracy theory. And then I didn't understand why the right people kept saying China was blocking our investigation. But,
no,
apparently there was a lot of truth there that was
right.
just being falsely called a lie.
Well, no. So here's the thing. I mean, if the I don't know which news medias were saying that the lab leak was just a conspiracy and not true. It might have been reporters who are just used to dealing with conspiracy theories, but I can assure you that people within the government were definitely taking the you know
Lab
the
leak
fact
theory
that the
seriously.
lab that it was. I mean, but the thing is, even at the beginning of the pandemic, there was no definite answers. Like we didn't know exactly where it came from, or it could have been we could have been mistaken. Sometimes intelligence is wrong. You don't know for certain, and you don't want to start accusing China of something that serious at the beginning of the pandemic. And
Hmm.
like I said, there's efforts in place to protect Asian Americans from hate crimes. Essentially, like we don't there like it would be very irresponsible to go after this, especially to go after the idea that this disease was created in or released from a lab, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. That would have been irresponsible to report um, for a bunch of different reasons. Anyways,
Hmm.
now we're sort of out of the pandemic, and we have the smoking gun, and it is we have we now know who patient zero is. And patient zero of the of the uh, crown-like disease uh, was a trio. Were three scientists from a lab in Wuhan. So this basically is yes, this it was definitely these three people. This is where the virus came from. This is not some conspiracy theory. We are out of the pandemic. Uh, I don't think I don't get the feeling like there's much risk to Asian Americans anymore. Um, to talk about this. And we do need to discuss this because it is important, to discuss the fact that it does look like the virus that people were dealing with that looks like a crown uh of the year 2019 it did come from a lab. And so let me share the article, and there's a bunch of articles on there on here because there's extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And we actually have three articles talking about this in the links. This is not, and like I said, I've known about this for a while too. This is not new, although I thought there's a high probability, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I didn't but and God, conspiracy theorists are gonna just go um go wild with this, and I don't want them to. But so yeah, here's an article from Perth Now, um, talking about the three scientists. And let me pull up their names here. Let's see, they were let's see, the scientists have all, what were their names? It was like Ben Hu, Yu Ping, and Yan Zhu. So those are the three idiots who started the pandemic. And apparently, they were just doing researching this various coronaviruses. I don't know the nature of their research. There are now here I'm gonna get a little conspiratorial. So take this with a grain of salt. They may have been researching combining coronaviruses and looking, at potential, um, bioweapons and stuff like that. But I don't think that COVID itself, that's the thing that shall not be named. Oh God, I screwed up. The thing that should not be named was any sort of like, weapon or anything like that. It was obviously a mistake. Someone messed up.
Well, they say it's gain of function research, which is
Right,
not exactly intended to create a weapon, but apparently is something people do to understand viruses better.
right, exactly. So yeah, it was definitely gain of function research. Um, and they were essentially making new types of viruses, and apparently they weren't very clinical about hygiene and safety standards at the lab, and this is the result. Essentially, they messed up. These three idiots messed up. They got infected. I think they died.
Well, I think one of their husbands died or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And the rest of us are now living with their mistake. Biggest office mistake in history.
And you can see why people might get very mad and say this is like an attack from China and everything, which is uh, probably not right. But
No.
it's not. But I'm thinking of like Rand Paul, who constantly went in Congress and yelled at Fauci and said we were funding it and they were doing gain of function research. And Fauci would angrily say, "You don't know what you're talking about. We totally were not doing that." And then of all the right wingers who say we now hate Fauci, we want to lock up Fauci. And in retrospect, it seems like they were not completely wrong with any of that.
No, they weren't. They they were doing gain of function research. We were funding them.
Yes.
This was not.
And we were apparently denying it and lying about it.
That part I don't understand. I think it was maybe ignorance. A lot of time
Oh,
the government.
I think it's what you said. The point is, they knew that the far right people were saying this was a deliberate attack from China. And so to oppose that, they said, no, we have to strongly push the other side and say, oh, it must have not come from a lab at all. Just, exaggerating the other side to try to resist the side they didn't like.
Well, no. Um, the narratives that were being pushed around the pandemic are part of a playbook dealing with pandemics. And you don't go around during a pandemic, accusing another country of it being their fault. I mean, that's just something you don't do,
Well,
period.
this is what Fauci and the government did about masks. They told us not to use masks because they were trying to keep the masks for the medical professionals who needed them more, but they
Uh-huh.
didn't tell us that. For about 4 months, they said masks don't work, and Fauci said that. And this is the real old medicine from when I was the 50s, when doctors would lie to you because they think you're stupid, and sort of to guide you to where they want you to go, they will tell you lies.
I don't ever remember government officials saying masks don't work.
Oh, they absolutely did. I remembered it was the official line for like the first 4 months was that you shouldn't even wear them at all. They don't work because they were trying to preserve the N95 supplies. They admitted it later. Even
Yeah.
Fauci admitted it later. They told you that lie to preserve the supply for the people who are more important than you, so your life would be sacrificed for them without telling you, which is a common technique in medicine. It's like the involuntary altruists of the polio vaccine. They deliberately gave people a vaccine that had like 1 in a million chance of causing polio when there was a safer alternative because that would lead to more total lives saved. And they didn't tell the people who were being sacrificed for other people.
Right.
It's understandable that a bunch of
Right.
people on the right got really mad and say, no, you're lying to us. And then they went so far as to say we won't even take the vaccine or anything, which is what happens when you lie to people and they get mad at you.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, we don't have 100%, you know, like I said, it's one thing to remain silent. It's another thing to spread lies, right?
Yeah.
Like, you could say, yeah, it may have come from, let's not jump to conclusions. It may have come from a wet market. It may have come from a lab, and then, just and focus the narrative, elsewhere. But, um, it's another thing to just outright lie, and that I don't think the government should be just outright lying. I mean, I was, part of being in information security, especially as part of the government, is to protect the public from information, right? So to keep information that should not be public within the confines of the government,
Yeah.
and that's fine. You don't get to know everything. I'm
Well,
sorry, you don't
it's
get
hard to, yeah.
yeah, you don't get to know how to build a nuclear bomb. I mean, that's
Well,
for your safety.
well, now we all know how. It's not that hard,
Yeah,
but I mean, I know there's a lot of difficult lines. It's a lot like government surveillance, where the government intrudes on your privacy, and to some
yeah,
extent you need to allow that, and to some extent you need to prevent that.
right. And so now we're gonna have to deal with a bunch of conspiracy theorists who are like, "Oh, we were right," and it's like,
Well, the problem
well,
is they were kind of right. It would be a whole lot better if we were like pure and clean in what we did, and we didn't have to like apologize for a part of it later.
yeah, yeah, unfortunately. And I still want to reiterate the fact that vaccines are very important. Get your kids
Yeah,
vaccinated, vaccinate yourself. Vaccines absolutely work. You are
yeah.
important. You're a good person. The government is not out to get you. Even when they don't tell you the truth, it's
There, I'm
usually
not
not.
so sure. I
Yeah.
mean, the government
Well,
is like any other large organization, like
yeah.
corporations. They do regard you as something that they would sacrifice under certain conditions, and you have to be aware of that.
Right. I mean, but the conditions would be very extreme. And they're certainly not going to. I mean, the US government is sexist and racist and xenophobic. The
Well, they
last people that they're going to sacrifice are the white, conservatives in, Nebraska. It's like,
oh, I don't think it's. I think that we're all expendable, and that's the way it really is, right? If you're the
yeah,
military, you make a plan and you say, well, we'll have 1 million casualties, but the other guy has 10 million, so that's okay. I mean, the fact is, to large organizations, we are all like ants, expendable under certain conditions.
yes, that is true. That is true. I mean, yeah, once again, we're really. I don't want to feed into the conspiratorial mindset, because yes, technically yes. I mean, if we became a threat to the government and to the people, like let's say we contracted a zombie disease. Let's say zombies are real and we start becoming zombies, and if they did not stop this outbreak, the world would be ruined. I mean, yeah, the government would come in and bomb us and our lives would be, destroyed.
Oh,
I mean, sure, of course, we
it
get that.
doesn't even have to be that extreme. If, for example, they discovered that a pesticide was killing a lot of people, and yet it was like too expensive to pay for the other pesticide, they would just approve it and let it kill people. That's the way it works.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a certain amount of people that are allowed to die from, not from having, substandard, parts in automobiles
Yeah.
because that's the cost of the lawsuits are less than like the cost of the recalls and all this stuff. I mean, it's not just the government, it's everyone. I mean, there's always people, it's stated that you can't put a price on a human life, but that's totally false. You can totally do it.
Yeah.
And
Happens all the time.
if the price of your life is a fair price to save something that the government or corporations or whatever feel is even more important than you, then you're probably going to die.
Well, or at least I recommend not trusting what authority figures say too far, because they really do have your best interest only so far motivating them. And there are circumstances under which they are deciding it would be better to just lie to you.
um I mean, okay, let's take the mask thing where they told
Yeah.
people not to mask at the beginning of the pandemic,
Yep.
and that was to preserve the masks for the people
Right.
that needed them, and the people that needed them were medical professionals, and people in high risk situations. There were just not enough masks to go around.
But what
And
they told us was they don't work and they won't save you. That's what they told us. They
okay,
didn't say
okay,
this is
citation.
why some
You know
people.
what? Citation needed, Sam. I'm
Okay.
I'm I'm pulling I'm pulling a citation. I pull up a news article from
Okay.
that time period saying that.
Oh, sure. I have it. I can easily have it next time.
Okay, next time I want to see that article because
Oh,
I
sure.
do not remember them, a
Oh, I,
government official saying masks do not work.
Oh, I remember it very clearly.
In fact, I will Google it right now.
Yeah, I was following it at the time.
Masks do not work.
It was definitely on the Pivot podcast. It was the official medical recommendation at the time.
News. Let's see, this would probably be in 2020.
Well, anyway, while you're doing that, let me talk about my article then. Because I
Okay.
think that'll keep things moving. I've got one I'm very interested in. China is building a breeder reactor. I've been waiting for this my whole life. So my first scientific project, about 45 years ago, was studying radioactivity of thorium. Thorium is a lot more common than uranium, and thorium by itself cannot be used as a nuclear fuel, but you can expose it to fast neutrons, and it turns into things that can be nuclear fuels. And this is a problem with nuclear power. Nuclear power, the U-235, I think, is what you need. And uranium and plutonium are extremely rare. There's not enough nuclear fuel to power more than a few decades of nuclear power plants. But breeder reactors greatly increase it. And in fact, China claims they have enough native thorium to power the entire country for 20,000 years. And the United States has 6 times more thorium. We're like the number 4 most. We have more, the number, rate the nations with thorium. We have the number 4 for the most here. So we have a lot. But what they've talked about for a long time, these reactors use molten salt. They do not need water cooling. They are considered much safer. And the molten salt flows around and it has thorium. You radiate the thorium to make it radioactive, create radioactive byproducts that you can then use to make more power. And we've all been working on it for more than a decade. But China claims they've got their prototype working and they're going to expand it out. And they see this as the green future, ending dependence on fossil fuels and switching to breeder reactors running thorium. And it sounds very good. So I'm glad to see it. And it's a partnership between America and China working together on this right now. But the actual reactors prototypes are in China. So anyway, I'm pleased to see that coming. And do you want to talk about smartphones, or are you still
Sure.
hunting for?
Well, no, I'm looking for any article that of somebody saying that
Yeah,
masks don't
well,
work, and from 2020. And so there's this
yeah.
one guy,
Mm-hmm.
Dan Forrest, a Republican, saying that masks never work for viruses, and this has been, and the article's debunking him, saying, "Oh, it's no, they absolutely do work."
I'll look for
Um,
it because I lived through it. There was absolutely a period of 3 or 4 months when they told us absolutely not to wear masks. And they laughed at China and Asia, where people wore masks and said they're just ignorant over there. But over here in America, we know they don't work.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, well, I'll look it
Maybe
up.
it's because I've always known that masks work, and I ignored
Yeah,
stupid stuff.
I was pretty skeptical of this, but that was the official recommendation for quite a while. And then
The official recommendation was not to wear a face mask
yeah,
because it was needed by doctors. And I remember it was somebody from the
believed that the particles were really small, too small to be stopped by the mask, is what they said. But
that
after,
those
but later on, they admitted they did it to preserve the masks for the medical researchers,
yeah,
medical
but
professionals.
I remember when the pandemic started, we all went home. There was a talk by somebody. Yeah, it was the military. I don't know, but they were saying, yeah, don't use masks, but I'll show you how to turn your T-shirt like into a mask that you can wear instead.
Yeah,
And I remember that. I remember that was the first thing that the first advice was like, yeah, don't buy masks because we need them for medical professionals. There's not enough to go around, but you can make your own.
there's a period when that came out too. Anyway, I'll look up some stuff. This would be a good thing to talk about next time. As long as we don't
Right,
use the forbidden word, we can probably talk about it on YouTube, which is a
right,
heavily censored medium.
right. And then yeah, there's this article from USA Today in
Yeah.
2020 saying that N95 masks do their thing. Health feedback 2020 article.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But the reason all those articles came out was that was the process of changing from the previous advice to the later advice.
Anyway, um Yeah, like I said, we're gonna need I'm gonna need some citation needed, I
Oh,
think.
sure. I'll look it
Okay,
up.
anyway,
But I think I
uh,
was much more interested than you at the time because I was older and had already caught it, and therefore I was highly concerned about it before others were. Anyway, let's hear about the batteries.
okay, and then while I talk about the batteries,
Yeah.
you can Google
No,
search.
no, I'll do it offline. I'm not
Oh,
going to do
okay,
it in
fine.
5 minutes here. I'll look it up
Okay, fine.
before another podcast.
Okay, yeah, let's go over to the battery, which I can't pull up for some
Mhm.
reason right now.
This
Here we go.
batteries article is quite a hit. People were very interested when I put it on Mastodon.
Oh yeah, so there's a new law that's going to hit Europe. So Europe is doing a lot to change the smartphone industry, particularly bad practices, particularly by Apple, in the way that they design their smartphones to be, disposable, essentially after a certain amount of time. And I mean, and this is how Apple and a lot of companies keep making money is that they have planned obsolescence. And one of the things that manufacturers understand about the devices that they're making is that batteries wear down over time. So that and they're one of the first things to go essentially bad in a device. So if you want to keep it running, a common repair is to fix the battery. And if you've ever done any sort of phone repairs, the way Apple and Samsung and all these fancy smartphone manufacturers construct their phones is that they have a battery inside. And instead of having it being screwed down or something where you can unscrew it and replace it, it's essentially glued to the case. And you have to undo the glue and keep in mind this is glued onto a essentially an explosive device. Like batteries, modern lithium ion batteries contain a lot of energy. They are essentially mini explosives. If you puncture them or do anything bad to them, they can erupt in flames. And usually, when you're working on lithium batteries, you're going to have some sort of like safety precautions nearby. So, a common thing you might have is a giant bucket of sand. I have special pouches meant to, throw batteries in and contain fires. I also keep like buckets of water around. I mean, these are small bombs.
And when Tesla's burned, they say it takes like 20,000 gallons of water to put them out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's incredible technology, but you are essentially dealing with energy storage. And once, if there's a short in the battery, it just releases all that energy and you just get a fire. And that it's
Mhm.
just nearly impossible to go out. What one trick that I use before throwing away batteries, because they are explosives, and that's why you want to take things to electronics recycler whenever you can. Sometimes, I mean, I'll admit it, I can't sometimes, but I work with the electronics. So I will need to make sure that it's safe to dispose of. And I don't recommend people do this unless you really know what you're doing. Um, but you get a bucket of water, and if it's one of those lithium ion cells that are, like pouches, not like the hard 18650s, you submerge it underwater, and you just start poking it and poking it. And I mean, it makes explosions, but it's explosions underwater, so it's fine. And it's very disgusting afterwards. The water gets all black with lithium and stuff, but um, afterwards it's safe. But you're dealing with explosives, right? And so and asking consumers to like be careful and replace your batteries by gently applying chemicals and heat to this explosive. No, not a good idea.
Yeah.
So there. So I guess I've buried the lead a bit here, but Europe the EU wants to have laws forcing smartphones sold in Europe to have replaceable batteries, user replaceable. So this used to be the case back in before the iPhone. Most cell phones had a little pouch. You could open it up, put in a new battery, and people would actually carry spare batteries. So if you ran out of batteries, you wouldn't have to have like a battery bank to recharge the one inside your phone. You would take out the battery on your phone, just throw in a new one, and then you'd be back up and running.
Yeah.
Which is honestly kind of an elegant, smaller, more portable solution. But it's not as elegant as the iPhone, which has just the seamless design, right? Which is what Apple wanted. And getting the and what Apple understands is that they just need to get the device into consumers' hands. And so all that matters is what the consumers think of the device before they get it and like right after they get it. So like the first month, right? Because that's when the reviews are coming out and everything like that. After that, it doesn't matter. So, they can make it look really pretty, right? They can have it be really thin. And to that extent make, maybe use some subpar components in some of their products. Maybe won't last as long, but they can make it smaller.
Well, I think from marketing point of view, Apple is right, and the results have proven them right.
They are
People want it to be beautiful. They want it to be a fashion accessory, and neglecting this means people will not like it as much.
right. And this is where you need something beyond pure capitalism to sort of step in. And this is where the European these European laws are coming into effect. Because if we just worked on pure capitalism, Apple is completely right. Who cares if the battery is replaceable? All that matters is getting into your hands, using it. And if it gets old, you totally should buy a new one. Look, the new fancy features. This one has 3 cameras or 4 cameras. From a capitalist perspective, Apple's doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, right? But from an environmental perspective, which Apple does not care about, Apple is not environment. They have no interest in preserving the environment in Europe or in the United States. They just want to sell you phones.
Yep.
The government has to step in and say, no, if you're going to sell cell phones, here's what you need to do long term. Here's how to be responsible in designing your cell phones. And so one of the things they did earlier was, of course, mandate that so that all cell phones use USB-C, which pretty soon now the iPhone's going to have USB-C, which will be good. So now all chargers will be compatible. There'll be less waste and stuff like that, which is good. I don't think anyone's going to complain about that. And why Apple didn't do this earlier, I don't know. That was
So
no
they can
brainer.
keep selling you more chargers, which also fill up the landfill.
I guess, but as far as I guess, yeah, if you use like Apple specific, but they were quick. I don't know. I don't know what Apple's thinking. But anyway, um, but this is more very much like I understand why Apple would not want to do this, but also I understand why this really does need to happen and why this needs to be mandated on companies to happen. Because if from a capitalist perspective, no, you just want your phone to look beautiful to the consumer that's going to initially buy it, and the consumer isn't thinking 3 years ahead when the
Right.
battery runs out and have to replace it. The government, it's just the same reason why the government has to step in and prevent people from selling you poison, like
Right. Like seat belts in cars.
seat belts in cars. Exactly.
Yeah.
So moving forward, probably around 2027, we're going to see all iPhones have replaceable batteries.
I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Well, I came across one that I was very surprised at. And like your article about the forbidden virus, I thought this was fake at first. And they said, you can predict earthquakes by looking at cosmic rays. And I'm like, wait a minute. You mean cosmic rays cause earthquakes? That sounds bogus, but it's not bogus. But that's not the reason. The reason is that the magnetic field of the Earth is caused by the motion eddy currents of magnetic material inside the planet, and that affects the magnetic field, and that affects how many cosmic rays reach the ground. And they've discovered this is a well-known effect, and they've in a new study showing it much stronger. If you look at the fluctuation of cosmic rays and delay it by 15 days, it predicts earthquakes. So you'd have early warning of major earthquakes by observing a change in cosmic rays. And they say this could actually be very helpful to predict earthquakes, except you don't know where the earthquake is going to hit. When there's a significant change in the motion of the iron-bearing material inside the planet, the first thing it does is affect the magnetic field, which changes the cosmic rays, and then 15 days later, it causes major earthquakes. So anyway, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and I should point out that there's major earthquakes all the time. Most of the time, it just doesn't affect people. It's only when there's a major earthquake near a major population center
Yeah,
that it's a problem. So
that's true. All right.
So I can predict earthquakes too. There's going to be a major earthquake this week.
Well, I didn't know it was that common, but anyway.
Yeah, in fact, let's in fact, you know what? If you don't know it's that common, let's go over
Hmm.
here and go to USGS earthquake map, and everyone should know about this.
I know there's small earthquakes all the time, but I didn't know there were major ones all the time.
Yeah, so let's do magnitude. So here's a 4.9,
Yeah, well, I think for
5.7.
this,
There's a 6.7. Sorry, 5.7 is pretty big.
yeah,
6.0 in the Tonga region. That's a major earthquake right over there.
okay.
No one's paying attention. No one was nearby. That's a major earthquake. So there was 7.2. Here we go, south of Fiji.
That's big by anybody's standards.
Yeah. But that was once again in the middle of the ocean.
And how
No one
long
cares.
ago?
Uh,
6:15
yeah, that was yesterday.
yesterday.
Yesterday, 7.2.
Oh
Like
man,
I said, there's major earthquakes all the time. It's just they're
wow.
usually not near population centers, so it doesn't matter.
Well, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
good. Well, why don't you tell us about Mercedes?
Oh yes. There's this gold rush right now, of course, to get AI to monetize off AI as much as possible right away. And and I've always said AI is great for content generation and to help people make content. And that's its main use. Unfortunately, people want to shoehorn AI into everything. And this is where we get into Mercedes. Yeah, they want to put ChatGPT in Mercedes. um, why? I don't know. This is so
Well, it
stupid.
sounds like it's going to be like OnStar. I mean, OnStar lets you talk to a human who will like place a call for you and look up directions and stuff. And I think they just want to have an AI version of that.
Yeah, but why open AI? They could have like Alexa. And the thing about ChatGPT is that it's an LLM, so it's very specifically designed to sort of make up sort of language, and no, it's not really designed as a interface. It's designed to sort of, I don't know. It's content
Yeah.
generation essentially.
Well, actually, the fact that it just tells you lies frequently would seem to make it the wrong choice for this.
Yeah, like if and yeah, for like informational services, exactly. Like you wouldn't use GPT for like as a replacement for Google. You would use GPT to say help you write a research article.
Yeah.
And I mean, not sorry, not that was a bad example. Help you write like a
Marketing piece.
yeah, marketing piece. Thank you. Yeah, where you're not using it to do the research itself,
You know,
but
this
just like
reminds me,
proofread. Yeah,
I was talking to my sister who teaches physiology to nurses, and she said, I have to warn my students not to use GPT. I said, well, I thought you could just make a better prompt. So I wrote a prompt saying, tell me about the Krebs cycle, look up authoritative sources, cite the sources. And so it cited like the NIH and stuff and presented references, which were all fake. One link didn't
exactly.
work, and the other link, it said, this is a description of the Krebs cycle by the Journal of Physiology. And when you click it, it's just a totally different article. So it just lies. As far as like citing your sources, it's terrible.
Exactly. It is not good for citing sources, not good for information lookup. It, like I said, it's good for content generation. It is good for, proofreading, coming up with ideas. If you're if you have writer's block, going to Chat GPT can really help you out a lot. Like I said, AI is a great tool for content generation. Why would you want to shoehorn it into a car? I don't know.
You know, I think it is basically the same as like going into an internet chat room and asking people for stuff. That's about the quality of what you'll get.
it even worse than that. It's going to hallucinate. There's no practical purpose. If you want to interact, I mean, one of the things that you might be able to do with like Chat GPT is or some similar AI is to have it as a in between layer between like a spoken language and some sort of syntactical language in the back end, like how you have Chat GPT write Python code.
Yeah.
You would have it do something similar where it's like have this command converted into a Alexa spoken type command. So if you hear someone, so if the LM here is like, I'd like to make a phone call to 555-7394 or something like that, the LLM can convert that into make phone call 555, whatever, that might work. that might be something interesting to look
Mhm.
into. But like conversing with it in the car, using it to like look up, no, that's not a good use case of GPT. I don't.
Yeah.
Why do? And another thing too, I guess we should discuss putting AI into our automobiles and having their automobiles talk to us.
That's what's in a science fiction staple forever. But
I
you
mean,
hope the AI would be less sort of evil and deluded.
yeah, I mean, like, I don't need my car talking to me.
Everyone's
I don't
loved
need
it
to.
since Knight Rider.
I don't. I that is true. It is Knight Rider.
And Captain Kirk talked to his computer.
No, no, Captain Kirk.
Computer,
Uh,
scan that planet.
no, no, no. That was no. So on the original Star Trek, they didn't. They actually had like push buttons. Um,
Yeah, but he did a lot of it just by talking to the computer. The computer understood him and did what he asked like a servant.
I guess
That's when
I don't
that's
know.
in Siri came out. I thought that was what it was finally getting Captain Kirk's computer.
Yeah, yeah. But I think the next generation was the one that had the next generation had the all the modern stuff. I mean, they basically predicted like the iOS interface in the
Mhm.
next generation because the idea next generation came out in like the 1980s, and they're like, wouldn't it be cool if we had a contextual graphical user interface that changes based on what the user's trying to do? And wouldn't it be really cool if it could also respond to voice commands, which
Well,
is
that
basically the template for the iPhone
well,
and the
Captain
iPad?
Kirk totally had voice commands. I was paying attention
Oh,
at the
oh,
time,
I
waiting for that to happen, and it took about 50 years.
Yes. But yeah, the next generation was the one that really sort of put out the blueprints for, modern computing. Although they really did not understand you do need to put text on buttons or icons on buttons.
Well, Jarvis from Iron Man, where the things just float in the sky in the air and he moves them around. Apparently, this new goggle from Apple really does that. You can just drag things around in the virtual space.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, that's been a thing in VR for a while. So
Yeah.
anyway, you have AI in cars. I don't know why. It's happening though. And Mercedes is doing it because why
Well,
not?
I can see why you might want AI, but probably not ChatGPT.
I mean, I would love a car that drives itself. I don't need to discuss philosophy with my car.
Wow, I'd probably like to do both of those things. But anyway, the um, anyway, I have a couple more that I found that I thought were interesting. There's an article in the Washington Post by Mark Thiessen and Danielle Pletka where they say Biden should pardon Trump. And this, of course, set off a lot of people when I put this on Mastodon. But I didn't even read it when I first saw it because it made me so mad. But then I read it, and I'm afraid he's probably right. This reminds me of when I had really and bad interaction. I wanted to like sue somebody and stuff. And I talked to my lawyer, and the lawyer talked me down. He said, what is your end game? What do you plan here? And here's where you get the point. I can understand the idealistic position of Democrats saying Trump committed a crime, he should go to jail. But the fact is, you can't put an ex-president in jail. You're going to have Secret Service protection in jail. This is kind of insane. And of course, the other side will never forgive you. And then they'll jail your candidate when they get back in power. And this kind of sends us to a dark, horrible place where we cannot realistically go. And I think a sane voice of moderation here is Rachel Maddow. He putting on a new podcast and points out we didn't do this to Nixon and we didn't do it to Spiro Agnew. What happens is when your leaders are committing horrible crimes, you make a deal with them. Just leave politics, pay a fine, and we won't try to put you in prison because that would never work. That would harm the country more. And, that's why I think if you just think about simple minded direct justice, Trump should go to jail. But Trump really doesn't matter. What matters is the country after Trump is gone. What you want is you want to extinguish his political career and leave us with a political system that will work in the future. And I think probably pardoning Trump with conditions, like he leaves politics or something, is probably all you can get anyway. And all these cases that he's been indicted for are not going to convict him and throw him in jail. They're going to settle like they did with Agnew under conditions like that. We'll settle, we'll lower the crime to something minor like tax evasion, and then you agree not to leave politics or something.
Yeah. So here's the thing that people really need to understand is that, if Trump likely did commit a bunch of crimes. I mean, It's
Apparently, he
pretty
did a ton
obvious.
of
It's
crimes,
pretty,
and they can prove it too.
yeah. It's
But that doesn't mean he necessarily goes to jail.
right. But what that does not mean is that the other side, the Democrats, are behind this, like it's some sort of witch hunt.
Oh,
It's
well,
not. That's not the case at all. That is not the case at all. And I really want to destroy that narrative, as much as possible.
I think the fact is 95% of Democrats, including me, hate his guts and want to see him go to jail.
Right,
So
but that doesn't
there's some
mean
truth in that.
that does not mean that that's why he's being,
No, no,
prosecuted.
I mean, the fact is he's guilty.
Yeah, yeah, but thinking that um that that the ex-president is being, as- persecuted
Right.
is what causes destabilization in our democracy, and that's not the case at all. No one's persecuting the
Yes.
ex-president.
No, I agree. However, the people on the right feel persecuted, and that's why it would be a
Yeah,
brilliant move for Biden to pardon him, and that would defang that accusation, saying, "Look, here I am, not persecuting him."
right. I agree. I don't think it's viable to throw to throw him in jail. I do feel like, justice does need to be served, but I don't think it's a good idea to just throw an ex-president in jail. And I do think the democracy comes first. We were talking about the greater good.
Yeah,
Like, when is it okay to kill your own citizens for the greater good?
yeah,
When is it okay to let people off the hook for the greater good?
yeah. And the person that started all this jailing your opponent was Trump with lock her up with Hillary and everything.
Right.
And we all said, what a terrible thing to do. We shouldn't be doing that. So we should remember we don't want to be doing that.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, we don't. Our goal is not. No one. Or how should I phrase this? Phrase this. Um, political political opponents should not be advocating for locking up their opponents, right? That is ridiculous. And Biden should never advocate for locking up Trump or whoever is going to run against him in 2024, and vice versa too. I mean, that's ridiculous. With that said, if someone like Biden broke the law, I would like there to be an investigation.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need Biden to go to jail, but I would like there to be an investigation, and I would like some sort of justice done. Whether or not that means jail time or not, I don't know. I mean, obviously, Trump did some things with documents that would send most people to prison. And whether he goes to prison, I don't care. But certainly this needs to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you
And
know,
that's why, there's rather than a childish, naive concept of retribution, it's better to think about how to steer the country to where it really should go in like a few decades.
yeah, no, I absolutely. If any president does something illegal, our number one concern is, justice, not they're on the opposite team and they should go to jail. That's ridiculous. And any leftist, any Democrat who wants Trump to go to jail because he's Trump, I mean, I would say just go check yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway,
That's
and the last one I thought was very interesting was a study. I found a psychology paper, a lot of good psychology studies, but they're talking about flat earthers. And the thing that I know you'd been interested in flat earthers for years, but I was amazed to observe that the number of flat earthers is enormous. The number of people that are not sure the earth is round is 18%. Now, there's only 1% that are sure it's flat, but there's 18% that think it might be flat, which is pretty amazing. And they talk here about what exactly is your psychological malfunction that would make you think this way. And that's interesting too. But to me, the most interesting thing is just this is not an tiny group of people at all.
no, and I mean, and it's contagious. That's the problem. Is it's not that there's like these 1% group of people, like, that absolutely know without a doubt that the world is flat. These are the Austin Whitsits. These are the Flatzoids. These are the, what are they? The Globe Busters people. Uh, Rest in peace,
Busters,
Bob.
that's good.
Yeah, rest in peace, Bob. Yeah, unfortunately, Bob uh Bob Liddell passed away about a month or so ago, and he was great.
He was
He
a globe buster.
Yeah, he was an engineer, and he got $10,000 to prove that the Earth was not rotating.
Oh, he's the
By
guy that made the rocket.
No, 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 no. That guy passed away a long time ago. That
Yeah.
was even better. But I mean, that's kind of how I want to go out.
Well,
Build my own rocket and then crash. I mean,
I
that.
applaud his scientific
Yes,
method. Instead
yes,
of just making up nonsense, he was going to do an experiment to see
yeah,
if the Earth is flat.
yeah.
To some extent, that's admirable.
I know. I mean, of all the flat earthers, I mean, granted his stupidity killed him.
Yeah.
I mean, he made Darwin so proud and made me proud. I mean, that's great. Anyway, um, but Bob Nodell, I should say that's his name. Bob Nodell, spent $10,000 to get a really highly precise gyroscope to prove that the Earth is not rotating,
Oh,
and so he got the gyroscope, he hooked it up, and he found that there was a interesting 15-degree-per-hour drift he couldn't explain.
so that's now, does a gyroscope actually move in some way to tell you the Earth is rotating?
Yes.
Oh, if it stays fixed in space and the Earth rotates around it and you can pick that up?
No, even if you just put it on a table, if it's a precise enough gyroscope, it will pick up the rotation of the Earth.
Oh, okay. I know
And
there's the pendulum that like precesses around, Foucault's
yeah,
pendulum or something.
Foucault's
Does the
pendulum.
same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Foucault's pendulum does something very similar.
Yeah.
Um, which is another obvious test you can use. But Foucault is such an interesting character. We can get into him later. But yeah, so he used the gyroscope, found that there was a 15-degree-per-hour drift. Basically, he proved conclusively that the Earth was rotating.
Did that convince him the Earth was turning, or did he just
No.
decide his equipment must be wrong?
The equipment, something must be interfering with the equipment. So
It's a
he
conspiracy, right? They've
right.
sabotaged all the equipment to fool
No,
us.
no, no, no. He thought that maybe the heavens were turning and somehow creating a vortex,
Oh,
making that. So he tried to like create a quartz box, put in a quartz box to make sure that like keep all the
okay.
heavenly energies from keeping,
Well,
you
that's
know,
essentially the ether theory. He's only about 200 years out of date with that one.
there's so many that believe in the ether theory. So
Yeah.
so one of the other things that they do, and they were talking about the Dunning-Kruger um, um, issue with these people.
Yeah.
Some of them very much like are very familiar with Michelson Morley, and Michelson Morley is, I mean, I do not, I didn't know much about Michelson Morley before Flat Earth. Because it's relatively obscure, but unless you were doing a lot of heavy physics, because it's basically the experiment that disproved the ether.
Right.
And but they know it, and they think, oh no, 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 the ether really does exist. What Michelson Morley actually proves is that the Earth is flat and stationary, and so
Yes.
it's like it's
That is
ridiculous.
that's the apparent interpretation. I mean, the Michelson-Morley, you compare the time it takes light to go down two paths, and if
Right,
the Earth is really going around the sun, it would apparently, sometimes you'd be going with the light and sometimes you're going against the light. So you expect that path to change with the year, and it doesn't.
right.
And this led to the difficult to grasp concept of Einstein's relativity. So I mean, I remember the naive interpretation of Michelson-Morley is the Earth is not moving.
Right. And so they think that the Earth is they very much grasp Michelson Morley,
Yeah,
which is very silly, and they think that Einstein was wrong. Oh, they also think gravity is not real. Apparently, is a big
that
thing.
part, that part's real hard for me to grasp. Gravity is like really easy to notice and demonstrate. You drop something, it falls. This is not complicated.
So what I think happens is that I think it's hard for them, because I remember as a kid, it's kind of hard to understand. Well, if gravity is pulling things down, why do balloons float? Because we do see some stuff fly in the air, like birds and airplanes and balloons
Sure.
and bubbles, and yet there's this force called gravity keeping everything down. How does that work? I mean, if you're a small kid, it's kind of hard to make sense of it, or if you're a dumb flat earther, it doesn't
Okay.
make sense. So they're like, but what if but what if it's just buoyancy? That makes sense. That makes more sense, because now there's not multiple forces, it's just that one force. And it's like, but as you were saying in our texts, a lot of even people in college classes, they hear their professors talking, they read the books, and they do the experiments in their experiments classes, but they're they don't actually believe that,
Yeah.
for some reason. And I think just flat earthers are very honest about the fact that they don't believe science. It's like
Well,
it
you know,
sounds
I
it.
would I
Yeah,
would say the guy that built the rocket has understood the real point of science. You don't believe anything just because somebody tells you. You
right.
have to do an experiment to find out what's real. That's not a bad attitude.
That is not a bad attitude. And some flat earthers do experiments. The problem is most of them I
Or
I
stupid
haven't I
experiment.
well, yeah, most of them are too stupid to do math for some reason. I don't know why. They
Yeah.
cannot do math. Like you ask them to do basic trig, they don't know basic trig. They can't do experiments that require math because they just can't do math. I don't know what it is. You would think that some flat earthers would know how to do math. They can't.
Well, I
I
think
haven't
that's
even,
this psychology argument. This psychology article is talking about
yeah,
that. They
yeah,
they don't even know basic science, and they
yeah,
think they know basic science, and they
yeah.
won't listen when you talk to them. That's the problem.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of us, and you can look at other people's experiments too. That's another way of doing science is that you don't necessarily have to do your own experiments.
Yeah.
You can also see the experiments other people have done, and do meta analyses and stuff like that. And so, like for example, there is a great experiment I would love to do myself. I unfortunately don't have billions of dollars, but that is, of course, to bounce radar off the sun and use that
You
to get the.
bounce radar off the sun?
Yes, it is
Oh,
very awesome.
goodness. Well, that's I know you can do it off the moon. Of course, the problem with the sun is there'll be all that extra radiation and light mixing with it. So how would you tell?
Well, you use frequencies that aren't
Yeah.
very, well associated with the sun. So, of course, the sun has a lot of
Hmm.
black body radiation, but most of that black body radiation is in the visible spectrum.
Hmm.
There's also, of course, a lot of uh, glowing plasma, and that's going to create very, you know, detectable patterns.
Hmm.
Like if you were looking at the sun through spectroscopy, you would be able to see that, oh, there's a hydrogen alpha line here. Um, Lots of hydrogen alpha lines because it's the sun. Um, but you can absolutely bounce like lower frequency radio waves off the sun,
Hmm.
get stuff back. Unfortunately, it does require about 400 kilowatts and a giant array of antennas to do.
So I guess you could do like probes of the shape of the sun and various layers of gas and stuff this way.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
But you absolutely can.
Hmm.
You can bounce radar off the sun, and then wait 16 minutes for the reply and calculate the distance from the Earth to the sun. That'd be great to do myself. I would love to do it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like I said, I don't have the billions of dollars to buy the land and set up a solar antenna array and stuff. So
Well, the one that didn't cost money that I did in physics that I was very happy with was gravitation, where you just have a ball of lead and you put it close to another ball of lead and you shine a laser off a mirror and you can watch the gravity between those objects. I thought that was awesome. You can measure capital G and you don't
yeah,
need any equipment beyond 1730.
yeah, yeah, no, no, yeah, yeah. Anyone who's done any physics, and I have an English degree, and even I've done the Cavendish experiment. Everyone does that.
Is that what that is? Yeah.
Yeah, you have the
I forget
two
the name.
balls. You
Well,
have
I
yeah,
always thought gravity was so weak, you couldn't possibly detect it with anything you could reasonably carry or build. But no.
yeah, no, no, yeah. You get the torsion bar and
Yeah.
the weights, and you can slowly watch it. And the best thing is nowadays it's really easy to set up a time lapse camera, so you can watch it just rotate towards
Yeah.
the weights.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, anyway, I think that's enough for this one.
Okay.
And we'll have another one on Tuesday.